So in the beginning, to make lasagna, we start with capsicum. Cut the cheeks of the capsicum off and place it on the baking tray. And we're going to bake them in the oven, and then we're going to get the skins off them. I'll take off the white pithy bit. Now I do all the reds first, and then the greens, and all the extra bits and pieces left over. I'll cut the tops and bottoms off, and when I've got all the cheeks of the capsicum off, I'll go back through and I will chop up the tops and bottom into little cubes, and then I put that in the freezer for later. Now all the capsicums are in skin side up. Now I take the ends, this is the top end, and I take off all the white bits, and they go into the compost bowl. And now I cut around the stem, avoiding knocking any seeds off. That is the challenge. Now I'll trim them all up, and then I will dice them all up at the end. And I do the same for the green as I did the red. I chop them all up and mix them all in one bowl. And now we have the capsicum coming out of the oven. Now just be careful of that steam. Now we use a tong and put them in a large snap-lock bag. And I do the same for the green. And then I leave them in the snap-lock bag to sweat, and then we come back to it later. Now we've still got the oven going. We'll finish with that. So while the oven's still hot from doing the capsicums, we'll get the garlic in. Now all we do to the garlic is we just chop the top little bit off. Sorry I didn't get that on screen, but as you can see, I went with 5. And some of the cloves didn't look good, so I just picked them out, but you left the rest whole. And now they're in the oven. And this is how we get these skins off the capsicum. And just, if there's a little bit left, just try to skin it with a knife, a sharp knife. And because we haven't used any oils or anything, any of the skins can go straight into the compost bucket as well. And now just slice them up, and as I said, when we do big batches, We make a lot of mess, but one of the ways I keep the mess down is this tray. I've got one tray in the oven with the garlic on it, and the other tray there, I'm using it instead of dirtying another bowl. And I'm just going to take the capsicum from the bag, pull the skin off, dice it up, and stick it in the tray until we're ready for the next stage. There's the red done, and the green. I find the green is usually a little bit harder than the red to get the skin off, but same technique. Slice him on up. Slice and dice, sorry. It was a slice and dice. Ooh, got the garlic out. Lovely and roasted. That's a capsicum diced. And here we go. Now, I actually have the compost bucket actually next to me, so I'm not just throwing the stuff on the floor. I'm aiming for the bucket because I'd filled up the bowl by this stage. Now, I don't save the paper of the onion, and I always take the furry roots off, but the top and the bottom of the onion, I keep them and I put them in a snap-lock bag in the freezer that I have marked as stock. And then when I go to make a bone broth or a veggie stock, but I usually make chicken bone broth, and I use them instead of a full onion. And same as when I use celery, I put the leaves of the celery in the stock bag when I use celery. And here we go, we're sweating off the onions. And I have got the food processor out. I very rarely use this thing except for when I make a big batch of lasagna. That is the carrots and zucchini grated up. Now we've got the capsicum all ready to go in, and there's the starter that I add. Here's the mince. I always brown the mince first. I drain off the fat and I add the mince to my big stock pot with my veggies. Now in there we've got some mixed herbs, a bit of brown sugar, a bit of oregano. Right, now we're on to making the white sauce. Now I always use my metal spoons, and again trying to cut down on some of that washing up. I measure out the plain flour into a bowl first. Now my recipe is one I've been using for years, and it's really simple. 2 tablespoons of plain flour to 1 tablespoon of margarine to 1 cup of milk. Now I scale that up to whatever I want, and I have learnt that if I make these perfect little hills, I can count how many I've done. So, and then at the end I just wipe the tablespoon down and the knife, and I'll use that now for the butter, and I put the butter straight into the pot. Now I put the butter on to a medium temperature to melt it, and then while the butter's melting I measure out the milk. So I've got that ready. I get out my fork and the whisk. Actually, give it a little help. Now when the butter's melted, I usually turn it down and I add the flour, and I always take it off the heat and make sure the flour gets completely mixed in with the butter to where you cannot see any flour left. And some of the flour makes little balls. I really should have had the camera on the other side because I'm kind of doing this cack-handed so I could show the camera. As you can see, I mix it all up in little balls so the pot is basically clean. Now you need to cook the flour off. If you don't, it tastes wrong. Anyway, I put it in there and you should hear it sizzling. You've got to kind of keep it moving so it doesn't actually burn, but you usually cook it for about 2 minutes, and then I take it off the heat again and we gradually add the milk. Now this is usually the tricky part. Now, I always tip the milk onto the side there and see how it bubbles up. That kind of takes a little bit of that heat out of the pan. And now I gradually work that milk in until it becomes a paste all the same colour. Yeah, so it almost looks like it, but still needs a little bit more working in. Now, if you do this part properly, you won't get any lumps. Now, add a little bit more milk, not too much. And again, like I said, I'm doing this the wrong side, so I'm trying the best I can to get it in the view of the camera. But we gradually work that milk in. And yeah, I'll probably add a little bit too much here, but I can, before I add any more milk, work this all in and make it a consistency. And what I do is I rub it on the side of the pot with the fork, and it basically gets any lumps out. I scoop the sides down and again just rub it side to side, making a paste. Then gradually each time I add a little bit more milk until I can add all the milk. You can see I'm just slowly working that milk in, making sure I clean down the sides because we don't want that going in later and causing lumps. A little bit of lumps in there, but not too many. Anything's in there at the moment, that will come out with the whisk. See, that's a good consistency. Now add a little bit more milk and start with a whisk. Yep, push that in. Now I've got it back on the temperature, turn it up, and add all the milk. And this is where we switch from the fork over to the whisk, and the rest is done with the whisk. Now I check the temperature, and it's still cold, so it's not going to thicken while it's cold, so you've got to get the temperature up. Yep. Now we've just got to wait for it to get thicker. Now this is how I check how thick it is, how it runs off the spoon, and by the back of the spoon, how it coats the back of the spoon. Nope, she's not ready. A little bit later, you can see it's coating the spoon a bit better, but not quite to the consistency I want. And a little bit longer. Oh, that's looking a better pouring. And that's coated the spoon nicely. Now we add the cheese. Now I add a little cheese at a time. And this is where I turn it off the heat. There's enough heat in it to melt the cheese. Now the cheese is melting in there nicely. Now the next bit is all the cheese that was left in the grater. I clean out the grater, and they're the lumpy bits, and I melt that right now at the beginning, so trying to use up as much as possible. And now I've still got some grated cheese left for the tops of the lasagnas. And now we're almost ready for assembly. Look at that nice consistency. Now the night I make lasagna, I usually cannot wait to actually bake it in the oven. So I normally just throw some pasta on while I'm doing the actual assembly of the lasagna, and we end up having pasta for tea using the lasagna sauce, and then we normally have the lasagna the next night. Now the first two containers here are Pyrex containers, and they come with lids for me to put in the freezer. And the third one also a Pyrex, but that's usually tomorrow night's tea. And this recipe does do more, but I actually have 4 Pyrex freezer glass containers of the same size, but 2 were already in the freezer with something else in it. So that's why we've only got these ones. So I do mince pasta, mince bechamel sauce, pasta, mince pasta, mince till I get to the top, when then it's just pasta and then the bechamel sauce, and then I coat the top with grated cheese. Now the sauce here is still warm, so as you can see those lasagna sheets lifting up, that's because the bolognese sauce is still warm, or it's at serving temperature actually. I break the lasagna sheets off to fit the corners, because the trays have corners and the sheets are square. And of course I can get a square block into a round hole. This is me smoothing a layer of bechamel sauce over the top. Now, I make a lot of different things using my white sauce recipe, and I make a lot of different things using my bolognese recipe. So I was going to make future videos featuring those, but I thought I'd better start with what I make first. Again, here's tea almost ready, and this is what it looks like coming out of the freezer. And here we go, nice and cooked. I'll slice around the edges because of where the cheese stuck, and then give it a little bit of a chop. The one thing I did leave out of this one that I normally put in when I do the mince is I usually wind up some mushrooms and add that when I cook up the mince, but this one here is missing that. And here we go. This is lasagna a la Car Christina. Thank you for watching. Toodles!